Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantir Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
We will sing Manre Krishi Kaj Janana on pages 25 and 26.
Manre Krishna
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is the price of success. Success is inevitably equated with happiness, wealth, fame, prosperity. Which is why success is something that everyone seeks. It will be very difficult to find any sane person in the world who will say, I want to be a failure. So we all want to be successful. Which is why also the great popularity of books such as titled, oftentimes so much of the books that we purchase depends on the get-up and the title. And so these books, how to be successful, how to succeed in business, success through positive mental attitude. There's something about these kind of titles, especially if there is a word success included in it, which somehow makes us feel, oh, this is something I would like to read. This is something I would like to buy. The quest for success is so all-pervasive that it is good to keep in mind some of the hard truths that are associated with it. Sometimes we are so much drawn to the result, the end, that we may lose sight of the means required to reach that end. And so the means sometimes do not get as much attention as they should. Swami Vivekananda once said, our great defect in life is that we are drawn so much to the ideal. The goal is so much more enchanting, so much more alluring, so much bigger in our mental horizon that we lose sight of the details altogether. So that's the main challenge. Sometimes we might see that happening in spiritual life as well. When we hear this, the goal being freedom or moksha or nirvana, or be free from all this, it's who wouldn't want it? We all want it. But sometimes we might get so much caught up in that goal that we may not pay as much attention to the means that need to be employed. What are those kind of boring details that are needed to reach that goal? The secret of success, according to Swami Vivekananda, was paying as much attention to the means as to the end. And there are two things that need to be kept in mind about this. First, the end does not justify the means. Sometimes the end may be very noble, but the means that I employ to attain that end are equally important. So it's a little bit like there's something good I want to achieve. But in order to achieve that something good, the only way I can achieve it is by doing something terribly bad. So are these bad means or something that is immoral justifiable in order to reach a goal which seems very moral? What is the relationship between the means and the ends? So that is one thing that needs to be kept in mind. And secondly, the means, which usually involve an effort of some kind, are the price we need to pay to reach that goal. So depending on how far, it's a little bit like it's like if you want to go on a journey, if you're driving there, and if the destination is very far, then obviously you're going to require more gas than if the destination is very near. So the price we need to pay depends on the goal. And in general terms, the more lofty the goal is, the more bigger the goal is, the price we need to pay is equally high. And that means, therefore, that we need to look at the details of what is the price I have to pay in order to become successful in life, in order to achieve success in life. And this is something that sooner or later we all learn, that nothing in life is free. Even when we are told that something is free, it only means that the cost is hidden and we are paying for it in some way. Sometimes free downloads of free books, a free cruise to the Bahamas. It sounds very alluring. It's like, why not? If it's free, why not? The problem is, nothing is really free. In fact, if we pay for something, we at least know what we are paying. But if it's free, it's more dangerous, because we are paying, but oftentimes we don't know in what form and in what way we are paying for it. There is years ago, when I was in southern India, there was one kind of a picture. It's a joke, but kind of a pictorial, kind of in the form of a cartoon. And some of you may have read or heard something similar. And that story went a little bit like this, that a person walks into a restaurant and he enters to the door, and the first he finds, immediately I'm entering the room, he finds that room has 2 doors. And the first question was, well, are you a vegetarian or do you want food? And so this person says, oh, well, I'm not a vegetarian, I can eat anything. So he walks through the other door. Then he walks through the other door. Then the question is, well, what kind of food? You want continental food, or because this restaurant was in India, you want Indian food or a food which is outside India? And this fellow said, well, Indian food I have every day. So he chooses the other door. Then the next room also has 2 doors, which says, well, you want to sit in an AC room which is air conditioned, or just like a regular room? It was a summer, it was very hot, so he chooses air conditioned. Then in another room, there are another 2 doors which said, would you want light music in the background, or you just want calm? He said, I want music, so he enters to the music. And so it just kind of gives his multiple choices every time, and every time he chooses, obviously, what would be obviously a better choice. And then finally he enters one room which says, well, do you want to pay for it, or do you want it free? He said, well, I didn't know even this choice existed. So he chooses the door which says free, and then he finds himself on the back street, which is an exit. So the idea was that nothing really is free. And we know today with all the stuff that's happening with, what's this, Cambridge Analytica, with Facebook and all of that. So, well, Facebook is supposedly free. And then now people are beginning to question that, well, is it really free? Maybe I am. That's why sometimes they say, when you buy a product which is free, actually you, the consumer, is the product. We are giving a lot of information about ourselves, and therefore our privacy gets sacrificed, our interest gets published, and then we don't have to wonder why we get so much junk mail, or why so many calls from telemarketers, or why so many advertisements every time you go online. So, I mean, we all know this. This is not something very novel that I'm saying, that nothing is free in life. And as we get older, we realize the truth of it more and more. But secondly also, not only that nothing is free, but the price is always proportional to whatever it is that we are shopping for. So ordinary things are available for a relatively cheap price, but truly precious things are expensive. So they have a high price tag. So we are generally careful about expenses unless it is someone else's money that is involved. There's another this one little story that's sometimes told of a wealthy person um, who, whenever he would go to buy something, he would always bargain, like always try to ask for a reduced cost. And then the shopkeeper once said, every time you come, you always bargain. You never buy whatever price I say. But whenever your son comes here, he never bargains. He always, whatever I say, he just buys it and goes. And then this man said, well, my son is lucky, he has a wealthy father. I didn't have a wealthy father. So we know that when we have to pay for something, we generally are more careful than if we are using someone else's. What is important here is, if we have not paid a price for something, then we will not understand the value of it. The great principles on which this country was founded, the founding fathers, as we call them, the price they paid, they knew what they fought for, what they sacrificed, and what are the values they instilled and hoped that the generation that would come later would hold to those principles. The price paid in the Indian subcontinent, so those who fought for the India's freedom, those who knew what life meant to be under a colony of the British. So they know the cost of the experience of bondage and the sacrifices they did. And same is true in many other parts of the world. So the price paid during the civil rights movement, for instance. And what often happens, tends to happen, is that over time, when the memory of these things becomes more and more distant, then the later generations, because they haven't paid the price for it personally, they don't realize the value of what they have got. I was reading some time ago an article about the present generation in Japan, for instance. And so that article pointed out how that generation immediately after the war, when the country was devastated, they had to rebuild the country, and how much sacrifice the people underwent out of love for their country. They knew that there was a lot of destruction, and they had to build it up again. People worked overtime. They didn't care if they were paid less than someone else, but they said, I want to build my country. And now someone from that generation was writing that article, and then they said, well, this new generation now, which is like almost third or fourth generation after the war, the memory has become distant. They have heard that, oh, maybe my grandfather, my great-grandfather fought for it. But they are not as, at least that article mentioned, they were not as hardworking, as much sacrificing for a larger good as their grandfather or great-grandfather had been. Now, this is not just a story in one country. This is pretty much what happens, that the sacrifice of the earlier generation kind of gradually becomes diluted in public memory. And so then the price, the price is not, the value of it is not realized. Sometimes the other thing can also happen. Sometimes we may pay too high a price for something of very little value. And so sometimes some people say, well, I don't know, I'm not good at shopping because I sometimes pay a lot more for what really would cost much less. So that's the other side of it. There's another one little story connected with that also. And actually that was narrated by Sri Ramakrishna. And that is there were two brothers. And then one brother goes out and says, I'm going to practice yoga. I'm going to spend my time doing austerities. And he is away from home for 12 years. And after 12 years, when he comes home, the family is very happy. This young man has come, and they asked him, well, 12 years you're away. What have you achieved? What have you learned? And then he said, come on, come with me to the riverfront. And they go to the river. And then he says, he just walks on water on the other bank. Said, this is what I could do in 12 years. And then his older brother says, is that it? 12 years, you have attained what I could just give a boatman a few coins and go across? Wasted 12 years of your life. So again, the price that we pay and what we get in return, we could either pay too much or we might expect too much from paying too little. And therefore, considering all these factors, we need to ask ourselves some basic questions in life. And sometimes when these kind of questions we have to ask ourselves, this cannot be done when we are in great hurry or when you're just tormented with a lot of projects on hand or there is a lot of anxiety or stress. We need to find some time when we are relatively calm, when we are able to at least for a few moments keep aside all the immediate concerns before us and then just sit in one place. Don't think about the future, don't think about the past, and just focus on the present. And then we can ask ourselves the question, what are the things I want to be successful in? It's pretty much not a doubt that we want to be successful. But we can ask ourselves, what are the things in life that I want to be successful in? And some of us can just think about it in the mind, if you can do it. And some of us may find it helpful. You can just take a blank sheet of paper and take a pen. And whatever comes to your mind, these are the things I want to be successful in. Nowadays, if you want to save trees, do it on your computer, wherever. But list the things that these are the areas of my life. These are the things I want to attain success. So once we make that kind of a wish list, the second column, we need to say, what do I need to do in order to be successful in these things? Clearly, if that's the end, that's the goal that I have set before myself, or number of goals that I have set before myself, I need to ask, what is the price that needs to be paid in order to attain that success? And, well, if you want an additional column or in the same column, what is the price that needs to be paid and what is the price I'm willing to pay? And it usually happens that way. There are many things I might want to buy or want to have. When I go to a mall and then I say, oh, these are the things I want to have. And then when I go and find, oh, this is the thing I wanted, but it's just too expensive. I can't afford it. And then most practical people say, I would have liked to have this, but it doesn't meet my budget, and they just strike it out. At least not for now, I don't want it. So similarly, things about that we want to be successful also. Everything has a price tag attached to it. And I therefore need to ask, this is the price that needs to be paid. Am I willing to do it? And it's possible that, by price I mean sometimes in terms of the time that is at our disposal, the energy levels that we have, and the skills that we have. So it's possible that some of the things I want to be successful in, I might not have one or more or any of these: time, skill, energy. And therefore, I have to say, well, I have to strike it out from that list, even if it's temporarily. So that way, you kind of pare down the list. And have a third column also. And the third column, against each of the entry that remains, I can ask myself, why do I want to be successful in it? What do I hope to achieve? Because one thing to be successful, but then what? What is it that makes me want to be successful? And then it's likely that we might find that the third column is pretty much going to be same or very closely related. That the successes that we want in different things are pretty much related to some kind of a joy, a satisfaction, fulfillment, whichever way one might express it. So while every kind of success in life will bring us many of these things, many students of Vedanta have found that all of those things can come through success in spiritual life. Now, spiritual life is a phrase that we use very often in the Vedanta programs. There's nothing very mysterious about spiritual life. Spiritual life simply means a life dedicated to spirit. But dedicated to spirit, I mean that to recognize that the world in which I live, the world in which I move and love and work, everything of my whole life surrounded by these things, that there is more to life than what is visible. Purely from a material standpoint, or just kind of a modern scientific point of view, well, everything is material. Everything is just atoms and molecules and energy fields, and call them by any name. A spiritual life simply means to recognize that there is more to life than all of these things that science, in a kind of a very generic term, has been able to affirm or measure. Now, I may not have experienced that which is beyond this, but at least I somehow deep down in my gut, I feel there is more to life than all of this. And that kind of a gut feeling is really what faith is. Faith does not, obviously, by definition, faith means you don't have any evidence. Because if you have evidence, you really don't need any faith. And so, spiritual life, therefore, means having this deep faith that there is more to life, more to my existence. There is a deeper purpose behind all of these things that I'm experiencing. And dedication to spiritual life means making an effort in some form, in some way, to find whatever it is that is beyond. Whatever it is that I don't know, I know it exists, and I'm trying to find what it is. So that is essentially what spiritual life is. So spiritual life, therefore, does not involve turning away from the world as sometimes people mistakenly think. People try to pit one against the other. So when we say, we already create these compartments, secular life, spiritual life, material world, spiritual world, as if there are these two entities. What Swami Vivekananda pointed out, and what many Vedanta teachers have pointed out, is that there are really no two things. There is just one. That one appears to me now as this world. If I can, let me put it this way. Some people have looked at this same one, which appears to me now as the world and everything and everyone in it. Some people have looked at this same one and have seen there the presence of the infinite divine being. Sri Ramakrishna and the great prophets and teachers who came before him, Buddha, Jesus, and all of these great names that we can mention, they lived in the same world that you and I do. When we looked out, we'll see the world in one way. When they looked out, they saw something different. They were not in a different world. They were right here. So what is it that made them see out and see something different than you and I do? So success in spiritual life, therefore, would mean that my perception undergoes a change. Now, let's put it this way. There is nothing very democratic about spiritual experience. No, I think this is a very vague statement. What I mean is this, that normally we find that if a majority does something in one way or sees something in one way, that's normal. And if just a few handful of people see something so different, we generally would say there's something wrong with that person. That's abnormal, because that's not what most of us see. So our definition of what is normal is what most of us see. From that way of understanding, all of these great ones whom we today adore and worship are very abnormal people, because their experience and what they said and what they was completely different from us. And that's why I said it's not democratic, because it is just as possible that they were really seeing things correctly, and most of us are not. So that's one other thing. We don't have to jump to any conclusions right away. We can begin by saying, I'm seeing things at present very differently from those whom we see today as enlightened beings. And I can begin with this kind of a healthy skepticism. Well, were they seeing it properly, or am I seeing it properly? And looking at their life, the power they exuded, the power to transform others that they had, we at least can be humble enough to say, there is a possibility that I may be wrong. There is a possibility at least that they are right. So I mentioned this to show that spiritual life does not involve turning away from the world. It really involves looking at the world deeply, looking at all of our experiences deeply, examining everything in life that we have been taking for granted, looking, learning, and growing. Spiritual life is, Swami Vivekananda's words again come to mind. He said, religion is learning. So as long as we are learning something, we are growing. The moment we stop learning, we are no more religious. So religion is not just a matter of believing something or acknowledging something. Religion is a very dynamic process of growing and learning every day. It doesn't have to be something very profound every day. It can be a tiny little thing. But even if it is a small thing, if it is something that I have learned, to the extent I have learned it, I have grown and become a better and a more mature person. Now, this is not to discount the happiness and joy and fulfillment that we get from successes in our lives from different things. What we do notice is that the fulfillment and joy and everything that comes from our present successes, wonderful as they are by no means eternal. Forget about eternal. Sometimes the joy may not last beyond a few days or a months or years. And because that satisfaction that we get is not eternal, we never feel totally fulfilled. All of us have achieved successes in life. Every little thing, every time, even when we go to school, we get good grades and we go to a higher grade. That's great, that's success, that's wonderful. You win a prize in some athletic competition, that's success. All of these things have brought so much of joy and meaning in our lives. But yet, there's always something that we keep on feeling, yeah, life is good, but maybe it could be better. Or there are some things I wanted, I haven't yet got. Now, how to eliminate that little bit of dissatisfaction, that little bit of sense of unfulfillment in life? And what teachers of spiritual life have said is that kind of a lack, however small it may be, will always remain, because nothing finite, nothing limited can give me an infinite joy or infinite fulfillment. So infinite fulfillment can come only from an infinite source. It cannot come from anything finite. It's like no matter how much ice cream you eat, because the ice cream is finite, the joy will also be finite. It can never be permanent. In fact, and we all have seen this, every joy we get in our daily lives always has a counterpoint. We go back and forth between joy and sorrow. So something that makes us happy, that happiness lasts for a while, then the graph kind of goes down a little bit, and then there is sometimes some pain, and then that pain is intense, and then that reduces a little bit. So we just go back and forth like when you play tennis, the ball goes from one court to the other. So we are just kind of going back and forth between joy and sorrow in life, just hoping that the joy remains longer than these intermittent periods of sorrow. But the sorrow never seems to go away totally. And because the joys and fulfillment that we get in life are limited, we see that success in our daily lives can never bring that total fulfillment. If we look at the lives of people whom we today see as successful, no doubt, in certain fields, in certain ways, it's amazing. But that doesn't automatically guarantee that they are completely fulfilled in every way, in every respect. In contrast, the happiness and fulfillment that can come from spiritual life is more lasting. Because, as I said, the source itself is infinite. And the quality of that joy, that peace, is incomparable. There's nothing we have to compare. That's why we read about the peace that passeth understanding. The peace that we have in our daily life, we can understand. The joy we can understand. But the joy and peace that can come from success in spiritual life, it really passeth understanding. And therefore, as spiritual seekers, we have to ask, what is the price that I have to pay to attain success in spiritual life? And the price we have to pay is really, putting in words is pretty simple. But only when we start paying that price, we recognize how challenging it is. And the price is simply this: learning to look at ourselves and the world in a completely different way. That's it. There is no time constraint, there is no special skill involved, nothing. Just, I'm seeing myself in one way, I'm looking at the world in one way. Can I change the way I look at myself? And can I change the way I look at the world? If I can bring about that change in a wise manner, the problem is solved. So as I said, it's very, very easy to express it this way. But when we begin to see how difficult it is to change our way of thinking, changing our habits itself can be very difficult. We know that. If I'm accustomed to waking up at a certain time and I decide, no, beginning tomorrow, I'm going to wake up very early. Now, eventually we will succeed if we are determined enough. But we know even these habits are so difficult to change. But these kind of habits, difficult as they are, the habit of thinking, those are even more difficult. And so while it is easy to say I must look at myself in a different way and look at the world in a different way, it can be quite challenging. So sometimes it is said that this price we can pay in 4 installments, because oftentimes we are used to paying enormous sums in installments. And so let me put it this way. In Vedanta, you can pay it in 4 installments. First thing, changing, we must learn to look deeply at everything. Just superficially looking at the world around us won't do. Well, that's what we are doing now. Superficially, this is how the world looks. If we look at it deeply, we might see something very different. To some extent, I think science helps us to do that. And that is, here is an object. I look at it with my naked eyes, it appears in one way. Now, if I get a very powerful microscope, I'm looking at it more deeply. I'm getting an instrument to help me look at it more deeply, and then I will see things that I couldn't see with my eyes. But any microscope still, well, we have more powerful microscopes today, but Vedanta teachers say that it's possible to look at things even more deeply than the most powerful microscope that we have. And that ability to look deeply at everything That is what is called the practice of discernment. In Sanskrit, the word for that is viveka. That not to assume anything, not to take anything for granted. Because we already have preconceived ideas about everything. But if I can look at everything as if I'm seeing them for the first time, I might discover there something I had not seen before. So that's the first price we have to pay. And it's not something just once a week or one hour per day or anything like that. This has to be an ongoing thing. Now that can seem like too much of a thing to do. But what we can do, I think, practically, why not begin by doing it for, say, just 5 minutes, looking deeply at everything. And the best entity to begin doing that is our own selves. Well, how do I see myself? And most of us will say, well, likely I see myself as a human being, that's a given. But then I may have so many other layers of identities over me. That I am a man, I am this, based on my religion, my culture, my gender, my political interest, my sport interest, and so on. Now, what I can do is, can I look deeply in my own identity and say, who am I really? Remove all these masks. Even this mask of a human entity. Well, what makes me a human being? Just a human body. If I were inside a dog's body, then I would be a dog. I wouldn't be a human being. So, a difference between a dog and a human being is that whoever is inside them is occupying a dog body and someone else is occupying a human body. The containers are different. That's how Vedanta's books ask us to see. And so, even my human identity is not really mine in as much as it belongs to this body. So if I keep on looking deeper and deeper and deeper, going beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, then I might discover my identity as connected with something which is not of this world. Theistically, we can say, one way of saying that would be, I'm a child of God. So we establish a relationship with something that is not a part of the material world. Philosophically, we can say, well, I'm this spirit, which is a part of the infinite spirit. But I'm kind of going beyond these layers. So if I can practice this, even for 5 minutes successfully, then that gives me hope. That if I can do it for 5 minutes, maybe after some practice, I might be able to do it for 6, 7, 8. So while it might seem too much to begin by saying, think about it all the time, morning and night, that will happen eventually. But why not take small steps? Which is what really daily meditation is. Meditation is not some kind of a magic. You do a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, and wow, you're free. That's not what it is meant to be. The idea is, my meditation practice can begin with this sometime in the morning and sometime in the evening. But eventually, the goal is that the awareness that is generated during that practice has to last beyond the time of the prayer or meditation that I have. So if I'm praying for half an hour, the level at which I find my awareness during that half an hour somehow has to last beyond that half an hour. So after I get up from my meditation seat or I come out of the shrine, the meditation has not really ended. That has to kind of continue. In the beginning, it's difficult. And that's why we have this meditation hour and then everything else. Now, eventually, that meditation has to kind of last. So it's like, okay, think about it this way. It just came to my mind. So suppose you're building a bridge across a river. Now, I don't know how it's actually done. I'm just kind of imagining. But it's possible that, first of all, of course, you have to draw an elaborate plan about how you're going to do, at which point the bridge is. You know at which point that bridge is going to connect one end of the bank and which point it's going to connect the other end. And oftentimes, they can begin construction in both the places. You don't say build a bridge and straight away bring something and put it on top. Especially if it's a large bridge, you have to go it in pieces. So you start with the two ends, slowly, 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 and then ultimately when they come closer, the bridge is bridged. if you like. So, and then a connection is done. So look at it this way. Look at most of us try to meditate or pray twice daily. So look upon these two things as a building of a bridge. So meditating half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening. And so you do it. And then gradually, the effect of that morning meditation lasts a little longer. And the evening meditation lasts a little longer. It comes. And then when it connects, then we can say, I'm in a meditative awareness throughout the day. Again, it's going to be that when I'm actually ostensibly sitting and meditating, the intensity will be much more than in my non-meditation postures. That's understandable. But at least something of that should remain. So that's the idea. So learning to look at ourselves differently means, let me do it at some fixed hours, and then gradually let that awareness filter through the rest of my 24 hours in a day that I have been given. So first thing, learning to look deeply at ourselves. That is the practice of discernment. The second, because as we begin to look deeply at ourselves, we are going to find things that are good. We are going to find things that are not good. We are going to find things that are helpful towards my going inward. I'm going to find things that are not helpful towards my going to my true center of my being. And so the second practice is therefore learning to let go of everything that I discover to be not good or to be an obstacle to my path. So first is to look deeply, find what is good, what is not good, what is helpful, what is not helpful. The second is the practice of letting go of that which is not helpful, that which is not good. That is the practice of detachment. And that is called in Sanskrit by the term vairagya. So first, discernment, looking deeply, discovering what is right and what is wrong. Second, detachment from everything that is wrong, everything that is bad. Now, all of this requires some preparation because the practice of discernment needs a development of a capacity within us. Same with the practice of detachment. Now, that capacity comes through the third thing, learning to make ourselves strong through training. And that is the practice of self-restraint. In Vedanta, they say, this is called, the Sanskrit, the technical term for it, they say Shamadhi Shat Sampatti. Shat Sampatti means 6 treasures. They call it the 6 treasures, which include control of the mind, control of the senses, the ability to withdraw the mind when it instinctively goes towards something that is not good. Fourth is forbearance, called titiksha, because there are things in life which are beyond our control. And so rather than get frustrated about it, have that ability to forbear. Then contentment, the ability to be contented and remain focused on the ideal, that's called samadhana. And finally, shraddha, that deep faith, because none of these things are possible unless I have faith in the validity and the power of my practice. Because if it's like anything in life. If you're doing something and if you're not convinced it's the good thing to do, you won't give your whole self to it. And so in order for success, we need to have this confidence that this path that I'm taking is the right path. So these are called the 6 treasures. So that's the third installment. And finally, learning to focus totally on the truth, on the goal, to the exclusion of all distractions. And that is the fourth quality. In Sanskrit, that's called mumukshutva. Sri Ramakrishna called it the deep longing. The word he used was vyakulata in Bengali. So these are the 4 things, the 4 installments, if you like, of the price we need to pay to succeed in spiritual life. First, learning to look deeply at everything. Second, learning to let go of things that are not good for our growth, not good for us, to help us achieve success. The third is the set of mental training to make us strong, to be able to practice this. And finally, the ability to focus on what we want and let go of all other distractions. These four practices taken together are sometimes considered to be the primary preparatory practices for a Vedanta student. So Viveka, Vairagya, Shamadhi, Shat Sampati, the six treasures, and finally Mumukshutva. So that's how these classical texts describe it in technical terms. But this is what it really means. So if we want to be successful in spiritual life, then this is the kind of price we will have to pay. And finally, one last thought, and it is this. Sooner or later, we will realize, and especially those of us who take spiritual life seriously, we will realize that ultimately there is only a spiritual solution to all problems in life. Every problem in life has a solution. God never sends us any problem which doesn't have a solution. So every problem has a solution. We can either go by these piecemeal solutions, or if you want a blanket solution for everything, then spiritual seekers believe that if I know the truth, if I know who I truly am, if I know my real identity, if the real purpose of this existence becomes known, all of these problems will go away permanently. So sometimes it's like some of the subscriptions you have to renew it every year. And if you don't renew it, you lose it. But there are certain subscriptions like for life. So these problems are like that. So some of these problems that we solve through commonplace solutions, they get solved, but they need to be renewed because the problems come again and you need to solve them again. But if you want a permanent solution to all problems, then spiritual solution is the only solution. That is how Vedanta teachers describe it. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Next Sunday, we will have Antar Yoga as usual. We have once a month. We'll have reading by two of our members. And we'll also celebrate the birthday of all who are born in the month of May. So all of you are welcome. And as I sometimes and often say that if you have friends and family who are born in the month of May, bring them along. Yeah, so they will think we have cake every Sunday. If they're not. On Wednesdays, we will continue with the study of Bhakti Sutra. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with the prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be